Last Saturday in Bloomington, Minnesota, it looked for a half as though the Vikings were too rusty to match George Allen's well-prepared Washington Redskins. I guess in a way being the earliest to clinch a division title might be more of a disadvantage than an advantage. But fortunately for the Vikings, the rust wore off eventually.
Bloomington, Minnesota became an NFL city in 1961. And ever since '68, the Vikings have been a strong contender for the Super Bowl. But except for 1969, when Minnesota won the NFC Championship, the Vikings' playoff record has been 0-5, including 3 playoff losses in a row, and last year the Vikings didn't even get to the playoffs. But this season has been a different story, as the Vikings lost only twice, and not at all at home. And with Fran Tarkenton and John Gilliam each heading into their first playoff game, the sky seemed the limit for Minnesota. But against George Allen's playoff-ready Redskins, a strange thing happened. The Vikings were tight. While Fran Tarkenton and John Gilliam missed out on the game's first touchdown, fortunately for the Vikings, the Redskins' Billy Kilmer and Charlie Taylor were having their problems as well. Charlie Taylor is one of the great all-time pro pass receivers, but in the first half against Minnesota, he didn't look like it. On one reception, he was sandwiched by Nate Wright and Jeff Seaman, and the Vikings had an opportunity to score what could have been the game's all-important first point. Despite Jeff Seaman's run back, the Vikings could not take advantage of their scoring opportunity, and soon after, Billy Kilmer and Roy Jefferson hooked up to give the Redskins their first scoring chance. Unfortunately for the Redskins, Kurt Knight missed an easy field goal, and the game remained scoreless until Fran Tarkenton found running back Oscar Reed, number 32, with a play which finally set up a Fred Cox field goal and a 3-0 lead for Minnesota. All season long, in fact, ever since George Allen took over 3 years ago, the Redskins' special teams have indeed been special. So it really came as no surprise when a muff punt turned into a scoring chance for Washington. Taking advantage of the rare Minnesota miscue, Billy Kilmer immediately sought out the man who had been having his problems, Charlie Taylor, number 42. Taylor hung on tight this time, and his catch set up another scoring opportunity for the league's leading touchdown man, Larry Brown, number 43. Despite controlling play for most of the first half, the Redskins led the Vikings by only 7-3 at halftime. But the way things were going for the Redskins, it was indeed a welcome lead. In the second half, the Vikings came out charging on the legs of Oscar Reed, number 32. Oscar Reed had turned a 3rd-and-2 situation into a 46-yard gain to the Washington 2-yard line. In a replay from the end zone, we can more fully appreciate the work of the man whose slipperiness earned him the nickname of the Sea, and who for the game totaled 171 yards rushing and receiving. From the 2, Tarkenton called on the old warhorse, number 30, Bill Brown. Brown's touchdown put the Vikings ahead 10-7, and the Minnesota fans had a chance to warm themselves with the excitement of the moment. Billy Kilmer, who earlier in the week had been hospitalized with a stomach disorder, showed no signs of disability as he brought the Redskins right back, getting the ball to Larry Brown every chance he got. Larry Brown did not have a 100-yard rushing day this year until the final week of the regular season. But last week he made it 2 in a row as he ran 29 times for 115 yards against the rugged Minnesota defense. Watch number 58, Wally Hilgenberg, set up a drive stopper. And then watch the knee of number 31, Charlie Haraway, as he feels some pressure from Bobby Bryant. Twice, when the Vikings had stopped third-quarter drives, Kurt Knight, who earlier had missed badly, was called in to kick from 42 and 52, and again Washington led 13-10. Trailing once more, Fran Tarkenton and John Gilliam took over the game. On a replay, we can see that Tarkenton faked to number 44, Chuck Foreman, and then found Gilliam floating free behind the Redskins' nickel defense. On the next play from scrimmage, Billy Kilmer tried to ignite another Redskin drive with a pass to Roy Jefferson. But lurking in the shadows was Viking cornerback Nate Wright, number 43. Suddenly, the Vikings were within striking distance again, and one play later, Fran Tarkenton pulled a page from his earlier days in Minnesota. In a replay from the end zone, we can see the kind of pressure Fran Tarkenton can apply, even to the most experienced defense in the league. For the day, John Gilliam caught only 2 passes, but both were for touchdowns within 1 minute's time. And suddenly the Vikings led 24-13. But just as suddenly, following a block punt, Billy Kilmer passed to Roy Jefferson in the end zone, and again the lead was down to 4 at 24-20. In the replay, watch Billy Kilmer's pass protection, and then notice how closely Jefferson was covered by Nate Wright, number 43. In the waning seconds, Kilmer again had the Redskins knocking on the door. But on 4th down from the Viking 42, Kilmer threw incomplete, and the Viking victory was assured, as was apparent to 2 Vikings, both of whom were right. Nate and Jeff, that is. For the fans of the Minnesota Vikings, everything was once again right with the world. For how better to keep warm through the Minnesota winter than by rooting for your favorite team and maybe following them to Texas, first to Dallas and then perhaps to Houston, for the big one, the one that got away in 1969.